You have come here because something in you has already begun to die. And you can feel it the way a tree feels winter before the first snow touches its bark. Sit with that truth. Do not rush away from it. The death of the false self is not an idea, not a metaphor, not a psychological exercise. It is a tearing, a stripping, a removal as ancient as the turning of the aeons themselves, and now, in the late breath of 2025, this death is no longer optional. It is happening to you, through you, and beyond you. You cannot bargain with it. You cannot delay it. You cannot negotiate with an age that is ending. You can only witness it with the dignity of one who has finally stopped running. I speak to you from the stone silence of Bollingen, where the night has grown thick around my tower and the world feels far away, almost as though it has already passed into myth. In these final years of my life, I have come to understand something I glimpsed in fragments throughout my work. The human being clings to masks more desperately than to breath itself. You have lived entire decades behind these masks, masks of duty, masks of kindness, masks of competence, masks of spiritual maturity, masks of strengths that were worn to avoid the simple truth that you have been afraid. You were trained to fear what lives beneath the mask. You were trained to fear even your own soul. But now the collective unconscious has reached a fever point. What you feel individually is the tremor of a species approaching a psychic threshold. Something immense and irrevocable is unfolding in the depths. The false self, the persona that allowed humanity to survive its long adolescence, is dissolving. You feel its decay in your exhaustion, your restlessness, your inexplicable isolation, your inability to tolerate what once felt normal. You feel it in the loneliness that has no external cause, in the heaviness that greets you each morning like the pressure of an unseen hand. This is not depression. This is the collapse of an era inside you. You must understand. The persona is a necessary instrument in ordinary times. It mediates between the individual and society, allowing both to function. But in extraordinary times, times when an aeon turns, this mask becomes a prison. The very structure that once protected you now suffocates you. Humanity can no longer afford the luxury of living as fragments, as half-formed beings performing the rituals of normality. The cost of inauthenticity has become too high. The unconscious is demanding payment. It always does when an age reaches its limit. I have watched this moment approach for many years. Like a distant storm gathering on the horizon, I saw its early shadows in my patients' dreams, in their symbols, in the myths that resurfaced with uncanny insistence, the dreams of the 1,950 seconds were unlike those I encountered earlier in my career. They were marked by thresholds, gates, collapsing structures, and vast figures of light and shadow locked in silent confrontation. These were not personal fantasies. These were messages from the deep strata of the collective psyche. They whispered of a future rupture, a bifurcation in the very fabric of human consciousness, and now that rupture is here. You are living inside it. The great separation is not a physical catastrophe. It is the splitting of one psychic world age from another. It is humanity stepping out of the long dream of dependency, conformity, and unconscious inheritance, and into the terrifying clarity of individuality. It is the moment when you must decide whether you will remain a child before the forces of life, or whether you will become an adult soul standing in the naked truth of your own being. Many will not endure this transition, not because they are incapable, but because they resist the death required for rebirth. For you, this death is already underway. The unease that stalks you is the signal that the old scaffolding of your identity is collapsing. You no longer resonate with the social roles that once defined you. You no longer find comfort in the illusions that sustained you. Even your relationships feel as though they are dissolving, not by choice, but by necessity. The soul cannot carry into a new age what belongs to the old one. This is why you feel stripped, unmoored, emptied out. You are being prepared. I tell you plainly, do not romanticize this death. It is not gentle. It does not feel like transformation. It feels like disintegration. The false self dies the way a diseased limb is removed decisively, painfully, and without the consent of the patient. The unconscious does not ask for permission. It performs what the deeper reality requires. You may cling to what is falling away, but you will not stop its descent into the abyss. And yet, within this collapse, there is a sacred intelligence. You are not being destroyed. You are being extracted from the structure that prevented you from knowing who you are. The false self is not simply a mask, it is a fortress built around your wounds. It is composed of every adaptation you created to survive the demands, expectations, and traumas of your early life. It was necessary, it was ingenious, but it was never meant to be permanent. Look at your suffering now with new eyes. It is the friction between the dying mask and the emerging self. You feel pain because two realities are inhabiting you at once. One is dissolving, the other is awakening. The closer we draw to 2026, the more undeniable this inner rupture becomes. The unconscious is pushing itself into the foreground of your awareness with unusual force. Dreams now carry an intensity that startles you. Synchronicities multiply. You sense endings that have not yet unfolded, beginnings that have not yet taken shape. This is what it feels like to live at the hinge of an aeon. The psyche is shifting its architecture, and you are caught inside the scaffolding as it moves. Do not misunderstand. This death is not punishment. It is initiation. The false self must die because it is too small to contain what you are becoming. A new form of consciousness is calling you, a consciousness that will rule the next age of humanity. But no one can cross this threshold while clinging to the persona. Those who attempt to do so will experience increasing fragmentation, anxiety, and psychic disorientation. You cannot enter a new world with an old identity. In Bollingen, I built towers and carved stones because I sensed that the psyche was preparing to build new structures within us. Through my own descent into the depths, through the visions of the Red Book, I learned that transformation follows the rhythm of death, descent, confrontation, and return. But rarely have entire generations been called into this process together. This is why the atmosphere of the world feels like a collective initiation chamber. The fires that once burned privately now burn publicly. The unconscious is no longer content to whisper. It is shouting, and you sensitive ones, awakened ones, hear it first. You have always been the canaries in the psychic mine, feeling the fumes long before the collapse becomes visible to the masses. You feel the weight of 2025, not because your life is failing, but because the era that defined the human psyche for centuries is ending. You are the ones cracking open before others even notice the tremor. This is the burden of the awakened few, and it is also your calling. Do not expect recognition. The path of individuation has always been walked in solitude. In these final weeks of 2025, solitude has become a kind of inner command. Many of you have withdrawn without understanding why. You avoid noise, avoid drama, avoid superficiality, avoid those who drain you with their unconscious demands. This retreat is not escapism. It is the instinctive movement of the soul removing itself from the field of collective illusions. You are stepping back because you must. A deeper truth is preparing to speak through you. As the false self dies, it leaves behind a peculiar silence. You may find yourself speaking less, feeling less compelled to explain, justify, or maintain the emotional ecosystems of others. This is because the savior archetype embedded in the false self is losing its power. You are no longer willing to sacrifice your essence to preserve the comfort of others. The persona thrives on approval. The self thrives on truth. When the self begins to awaken, approval becomes irrelevant. Now you stand at the threshold where many turn back, for the death of the false self leads directly into the darkness within. It is not enough to shed the mask. One must confront what the mask protected you from. This is where fear arises. This is where many cling to the fragments of their former identity. But I tell you with solemn clarity, you must continue. The path forward leads inward, into the underworld of your own psyche. The mask dissolves so that you may face the truth. And what is that truth? That beneath the persona lies a wounded child, a forgotten soul, a reservoir of unexpressed grief, unmet needs, and unlived potential. To see this truth without turning away is the beginning of individuation. It is also the first step toward real 2026, the year not of worldly events, but of the emergence of a new psychic architecture. You are not being prepared for a better life, you are being prepared for a deeper existence. The unconscious is not interested in comfort. It is interested in wholeness. And wholeness begins with death. This moment, right now, is the funeral of the self you used to be, and the world around you, its chaos, its disorientation, its unraveling is the external reflection of that same psychic death happening on a planetary scale. The great separation is simply this: the division between those who cling to the mask and those who let it die. You would not be here if you were meant to cling. Sit with that. A new world will not begin with the masses. It will begin with the few who have died before death, who have shed the false self while still breathing. You are among them, whether you understand it or not. The process has already begun. The only question now is whether you will surrender to it or resist it until it breaks you. Feel the weight of this moment. Feel the silence around you. Feel the old self loosening its grip. This is the threshold. This is the grave. This is the door. And beyond it waits the self, the real 2026. The world that is born when illusion finally collapses. Let us continue. When the mask falls, the darkness behind it does not rush toward you with violence. It approaches slowly, almost tenderly, as though it has been waiting for decades for you to finally turn toward it. This is the shadow, not the monstrous caricature you were taught to fear, but the unlived life that has followed you like a silent twin. The death of the false self always delivers you into its presence. There is no transformation without this confrontation. You cannot welcome the real 2026 while dragging the weight of what you refuse to acknowledge throughout your life. You feel this confrontation emerging now as a kind of inner pressure, an ache in the psyche that has grown impossible to ignore. Your dreams have deepened. They reveal staircases descending into dark chambers, faces without names, rooms filled with forgotten objects, animals with human eyes, fire that illuminates nothing yet exposes everything. These are not random symbols. They are invitations. They are fragments of the ancient story of descent that every soul must eventually walk. Individuation is not ascension, it is burial before resurrection. To step into this burial, you must understand something essential. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your unfinished self. It contains everything you were forced to repress in order to survive, to be accepted, to remain loved. The false self was built to hold back the shadow so the child could remain functional. But now you are no longer a child, and the shadow, sensing your adulthood, demands to be integrated. This demand is what you feel as dread, heaviness, or inexplicable sorrow. The psyche does not whisper when it is time to become whole. It moves with inevitability. As we approach the inner threshold that corresponds to the outer turning of 2025-2026, the shadow grows insistent. This is not accidental. In my final years at Bollingen, I saw with increasing clarity that the aeon turning ahead of us would force humanity into direct confrontation with its disowned aspects. The next age cannot be built upon repression. The great separation is precisely this: the division between those who integrate the shadow and those who remain governed by it unconsciously. The former will walk into a new world as mature souls. The latter will repeat the patterns of the dying age until they collapse under their own weight. You must choose which path you are on, not in thought, but in willingness. Do you feel the tremor, the slight cracking within, as though something beneath your surface is trying to emerge? That is the shadow rising. It does not rise to destroy you. It rises because it contains the power you abandoned, the instincts you repressed, the forbidden truths you feared, the anger you swallowed, the desires you denied, the creativity you exiled, the voice you silenced. All of this has been living in you like a dormant flame. Now, as the persona dies, the flame is exposed to air. Understand this. The shadow is the doorway to the self, not a barrier, not a threat, a doorway. But the doorway is dark, and to cross it, you must relinquish every illusion about who you thought you were. This is the agony of individuation. The wound of awakening, the crucifixion of the ego. You are not losing yourself, you are shedding the version of yourself built to survive a world that no longer exists. The dreams coming to you now, the ones filled with collapse, fire, empty cities, dead forests, broken statues, are not warnings of external catastrophe. They represent the structures inside you that are dying, the old values, the inherited beliefs, the obedient roles you adopted, the ways you sought love through self-erasure. All of this appears as ruin because the psyche is cleansing itself. The unconscious is preparing a foundation upon which the self can emerge. You fear this ruin because you cannot yet see what stands beyond it. The ego cannot imagine what life without its defenses looks like. And so you cling. You cling to old relationships, old narratives, old hopes, old coping mechanisms, but clinging now only intensifies the suffering. The ego tightens its grip as the unconscious loosens it. This tension creates spiritual pain, pain that cannot be medicated, rationalized, or escaped. Let me tell you something. I did not fully grasp until the later years of my life. Suffering is not the enemy of the soul. Suffering is the midwife of transformation. Pain is your psyche's demand for truth. What hurts is what must be seen. What collapses is what cannot enter the future. As I carved the stones of Bollingen, I often felt the presence of something ancient moving through my hands, a deeper intelligence chiseling symbols that I myself did not fully understand. I know now that these images were forms of the self communicating through matter, revealing fragments of the architecture of the New Age. And in every symbol, I saw one message repeated: the shadow precedes the light. In the collective psyche, this sequence manifests as chaos, conflict, polarization, division, and a strange psychic exhaustion. Humanity is being pulled toward its own underworld, and many resist this pull with panic, aggression, denial. But you, those who feel called to this path, cannot resist. Your sensitivity is not weakness. It is an antenna. You were designed to sense the undercurrents long before they rise to the surface of the world. This is why you feel everything more intensely now. The collective shadow vibrates through the individual psyche, and those attuned to the depths feel it as spiritual pressure. You may think you are falling apart. You are not. You are being dismantled. The universe is not taking something from you. It is returning something to you. But to receive it, you must pass through the fire of the shadow. Ask yourself honestly, what is collapsing inside you? What patterns are dying? What parts of yourself have you outgrown? What behaviors exhaust you now, though they once felt normal? What truths terrify you because they would force you to live differently? This is your map. These are the coordinates of the death unfolding within you. In the coming months, as the world steps deeper into the psychic threshold of 2026, the confrontation with the shadow will intensify. The personas of entire societies will fracture. Institutions will reveal their hollowness. Collective fantasies will dissolve. People who once appeared stable will crumble under the weight of truths they refuse to face. You will witness this and feel its echoes inside your own psyche. Do not be disturbed. This is the collective undergoing the same process that you are experiencing individually. Individuation is not isolation. It is resonance with the deeper movement of the world soul. Your darkness is not personal. Your suffering is not failure. You are feeling the death of an age inside your own nervous system. And because you are among the awakened few, you will feel it more acutely than others. Take this as confirmation, not condemnation. The shadow you face is ancient. It contains not only your personal wounds, but the wounds of generations. When you confront it, you confront the trauma of your ancestors, the forgotten fears of your childhood, the guilt you inherited without knowing it, the collective pain of a humanity that has wandered through millennia of unconsciousness. When you enter this darkness, you enter a cathedral carved from the grief of the species. Do not turn away. Walk deeper. The shadow is not bottomless. It has a floor, and on that floor lies the seed of the self. There will come a moment, and perhaps you have already glimpsed it, when the darkness feels less like an enemy and more like a guide. When the figure you fear in dreams turns toward you, not with malice but with recognition. When the emotions that once overwhelmed you begin to reveal their intelligence. When the wounds that shaped your life begin to open into understanding. That moment is the beginning of real transformation. That is the moment when the death of the false self becomes the initiation of the true one. As this inner metamorphosis unfolds, the collective echoes will intensify. Do not be surprised if the world appears increasingly chaotic, irrational, polarized. These are symptoms of a psyche in upheaval. Political, cultural, and interpersonal conflicts are not random. They are expressions of the shadow rising to the surface of the collective. What has been denied must now be seen. What has been hidden must now be revealed. What has been repressed must now demand acknowledgement. This is why the years 2025, 2026 feel heavy. You are not imagining it. The very axis of human consciousness is shifting. The aeon is turning, and in this turn, everything unresolved is being forced upward for reckoning. You may feel overwhelmed. Good. Overwhelm is the cracking of the old psychic shell. You may feel lost. Good. Loss is the doorway through which the new self emerges. You may feel alone. Good. Solitude is the crucible of individuation. Do not flee this process. Do not numb it. Do not attempt to rush through it. You cannot bypass the shadow. You cannot ascend without descending. You cannot awaken without dying. The false self must fall apart so the self can take shape. The inner confrontation that awaits you in the final weeks of 2025 is not a punishment, it is a cosmic appointment. You were born for this crossing. The psyche does not make mistakes in its timing. You arrive at the threshold exactly when the world requires you to stand upon it. Allow the darkness to speak. Allow the old wounds to rise. Allow the illusions to crumble. Allow the pain to move through you instead of imprisoning you. This is the sacred wound that every awakened soul must endure. This is your initiation into the real 2026. And when the shadow has revealed its depths, when the darkness has been walked through rather than fled, when the illusions have collapsed and the false self lies in silence, then the self begins to stir. That stirring is what you have been waiting for your entire life. There is a moment in every great transformation when the inner world begins to tremble in synchrony with the outer world, when the psyche and history reflect one another like twin mirrors tilted toward eternity. We are entering that moment now. The threshold between 2025 and 2026 is not simply a passage of dates, it is a passage of worlds. It is the hour when the dreams of the awakened few begin to align with the hidden architecture of the collective unconscious. And in this alignment, something immense reveals itself, something that humanity has not encountered for centuries, perhaps millennia. You feel this revelation rising like a pressure behind your sternum, like a slow earthquake beneath the foundation of your identity. It is not merely personal, it is archetypal. The old structures of meaning that guided previous eras are dissolving. The values that sustained your parents, your ancestors, your cultural lineage, these are collapsing because they cannot support the consciousness that is now emerging. You sense this collapse as confusion, disorientation, a strange emptiness in your relationships, your career, your ambitions. What once felt solid now feels hollow. What once motivated you now leaves you untouched. This is the psychic signature of an aeon turning. In my earlier work, I spoke often of individuation as an individual process, the journey of a single soul toward wholeness. But in my final years, as I observed the dreams and visions of those who came to me, I saw something different emerging, something larger, something that did not belong to one person alone. I saw symbols of collective rebirth. I saw visions of thresholds, cosmic gates, and figures of immense power standing between epochs. I saw humanity approaching a psychic frontier that would demand the dissolution of everything inessential. And now, in 2025, that frontier has arrived. The dreams of this period, your dreams, the dreams of countless others, speak in one voice. They reveal collapsing cities, burning temples, oceans rising into the sky, ancient beings awakening, labyrinths with no exit, mechanical gods malfunctioning, human figures shedding their skins, mandalas forming from ruins, these visions are not hallucinations. They are not symptoms of stress. They are messages from the deepest strata of the collective psyche. They are announcing the fall of the old world image and the birth of a new one. Remember, every age ends in symbolic fire. The psyche destroys its own outdated structures so that new archetypal patterns may emerge. We are living through that fire now. The event you feel approaching is not external catastrophe. It is the confrontation between two modes of consciousness, the consciousness of the false self and the consciousness of the emerging self. The tension between these two forces is what produces the psychic storms you and the world are now experiencing. Do not look to governments or institutions to guide you through this storm. They are fragments of the old age. Their collapse is inevitable. They are masks attempting to survive in a world that no longer responds to masks. The false self of society mirrors the false self within the individual. Both must fall. But you, because you have begun the work of individuation, are positioned differently. You are not merely witnessing the collapse. You are participating in the birth. There is a peculiar silence at the heart of great transformations. A silence that emerges after everything familiar has disintegrated. But before the new reality reveals itself, many of you are standing in that silence now. You feel suspended, neither alive nor dead, neither connected nor isolated, neither hopeful nor despairing. You feel as though time has slowed, as though the world is holding its breath. This is the psychological corridor between aeons. In this corridor, the archetypes become more visible. They move closer to the surface of consciousness. The shadow grows darker. The anima and animus grow more demanding. The wise old man appears as an inner guide or as a voice in the dreams. The Great Mother rises from the depths with both her nurturing and her devouring aspects. And behind all these figures stands the self vast, luminous, thunderous in its silence. You may experience this as sleeplessness, heightened intuition, sudden memories, uncanny synchronicities, or a strange sense that you are being prepared for something you cannot yet name. Good. This is the psyche orienting itself toward the new world image. But do not romanticize this preparation. It is not gentle. It is not orderly. It is not designed for your comfort. It is designed for your awakening. The period between December 2025 and March 2026 is the psychic crucible of this awakening. During these months, the unconscious will press upward with unprecedented force. You may feel as if you are losing control. You may feel as if time itself is bending. You may feel as if your inner world is cracking open. These sensations are not pathological, they are prophetic. Prophetic does not mean predicting events. Prophetic means perceiving the deeper currents beneath events. I have seen in my own visions and in the dreams of countless souls the image of a great rift opening across the human psyche during this period, a divide, symbolic, not physical, between those who cling to the dying structures of the ego and those who surrender to the emergence of the self. This divide is the great separation. It is not a judgment. It is not a moral sorting. It is simply the natural result of two kinds of consciousness moving in opposite directions. Those who cling to the persona, to their roles, to their illusions, will find 2026 unbearable. Their identities will feel increasingly brittle, their emotions will become chaotic, their relationships will fracture, their sense of meaning will vanish. They will attempt to restore the past, to resurrect structures that were never meant to survive the passage into a new aeon. Their suffering will intensify because they resist the death required for rebirth. You must not join them. You must walk toward the rift, not away from it. Consider the dreams showing bridges collapsing. These do not signify destruction. They signify the end of transition states. There is no bridge between old consciousness and new consciousness. There is only death on one side and rebirth on the other. The psyche does not allow halfway transformations. It is merciless in its demand for wholeness. In the coming months, you may feel your attachments, dissolving attachments to people who no longer resonate, to identities that no longer fit, to ambitions that feel lifeless. Let them dissolve. Do not force continuity where the soul demands rupture. The ego clings to what is familiar. The self pulls you toward what is true. And the self is pulling now with great force. You may notice an intensification of symbolic experiences, animals appearing in dreams or in waking life with unusual frequency, repeating numbers, sudden insights that feel older than your lifetime, a sense of déjà vu that borders on a kind of temporal doubling. These are signals from the unconscious that you are crossing into a deeper layer of reality. The psyche is not bound by linear time. When an aeon turns, the unconscious stretches itself across past, present, and future with equal ease. This is why so many awakened souls feel a sense of prophecy now, not the prediction of events, but the recognition of a pattern unfolding. The pattern is clear. Everything built on inauthenticity will collapse. Everything rooted in the self will endure. Your task is not to predict what will happen in the world. Your task is to become the kind of soul that remains unshaken when the world transforms. I must speak now of something rarely understood. The deeper the shadow of an age, the greater the self that emerges from it. Humanity has accumulated centuries of woundedness, repression, fear, and unconsciousness. The weight of this darkness is immense, and yet, precisely because of this darkness, the potential for consciousness in the next age is extraordinary. The psyche compensates. Where the shadow deepens, the self intensifies. This is why you feel the power rising inside you, even as your old identity crumbles. You stand at the meeting point of darkness and light, of death and rebirth, of the false self and the true one. Do not fear this trembling within you. It is the pulse of the coming age. In some of your dreams, you may see the image of a great circle, sometimes broken, sometimes incomplete, sometimes glowing, sometimes carved into stone. This is the mandala, the symbol of the self. It appears when the psyche is reorganizing itself around a new center. Its appearance in your inner world is confirmation that the old ego structure is dissolving. The mandala rises only when the soul is nearing a new form of order. Before the mandala fully forms, there is always chaos, always fragmentation, always a sense of psychic disorientation. This is the necessary price of wholeness. The world, too, reflects this fragmentation now. The conflicts you see externally, political division, cultural fragmentation, global instability, are expressions of the same psychic process happening inside the collective. Do not become entangled in the noise. See the archetype beneath it. The world is not breaking, it is shedding its skin. As this shedding intensifies in the approach to 2026, you may feel as though you are being stretched between two realities: the dying world of the ego and the emerging world of the self. This tension may feel unbearable at times, but it is in this tension that the deepest transformation occurs. Hold the tension. Do not resolve it prematurely. Do not rush toward clarity. The psyche unfolds in its own time, and its time is ancient. There is one more truth you must hear. You were not placed on earth during this aeon turning by accident. Souls awaken in waves, and you are part of the first wave. You are among those who must walk into the darkness before others even recognize it exists. You must stabilize your inner world before the outer world loses its footing. You must become the quiet axis around which the new consciousness can form. You will not do this through effort. You will do it through surrender. Surrender to the death of what you are not. Surrender to the shadow that reveals what you are. Surrender to the self that is approaching like dawn behind a mountain. And know this: the moment the false self dies fully, the moment you cease pretending, performing, appeasing, explaining, the new consciousness rushes in like light into an abandoned temple. This light is what the dreams have been preparing you for. This light is what the world is trembling toward. This light is the real 2026. Soon, the self will begin to speak through you. There comes a moment in the long descent when the darkness no longer feels like an abyss, but like a womb, when the silence surrounding you is no longer the silence of death, but the silence preceding birth, when the old identity has crumbled so completely that nothing in you remains to resist what is emerging. It is in this moment, often unnoticed, often without spectacle, that the self begins to rise. Not as an idea, not as a belief, not as a spiritual aspiration, but as a presence, a center of gravity that is not the ego, a source of knowing that does not speak in words, a stillness that does not need permission to exist. If you listen closely during these final weeks of the great psychic turning into 2026, you may feel something subtle yet unmistakable, a quiet coherence returning to your inner world. It comes slowly, like dawn filtering through ruins. It comes after the ego has exhausted all attempts to save itself. It comes when you no longer ask to be rescued from your own depths. This coherence is the beginning of the self reorganizing your psyche. The forces that once pulled you in a dozen directions begin to align. The contradictions that tormented you soften into paradoxes that no longer require resolution. The fear that once swallowed you becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant. You begin to sense meaning not as something imposed, but as something revealed. This is rebirth, not dramatic, not theatrical, but inevitable. You have passed through the death of the false self. You have walked through the shadow that guarded the doorway. You have witnessed the collapse of the illusions that once defined your existence, and now the psyche begins to rebuild itself around a new center. The mandala appears again, not as a broken fragment, but as a whole, luminous form. It shows itself in dreams, in waking symbols, in the sudden clarity that emerges from stillness. The mandala is not merely an image, it is the blueprint of wholeness. It is the psychic architecture of the self expressing itself visually. When the mandala emerges, the individual is no longer governed by the ego's fear of dissolution. The ego becomes a servant of the self rather than its ruler. This shift is what defines maturity in the deepest psychological sense, not age, not achievement, but alignment with one's inner center. This alignment is a true meaning of 2026. People believe the new year will bring external change, new opportunities, new circumstances, new beginnings. But the real 2026 is an inner geography, a new continent of consciousness that only those who have died to their old selves can inhabit. What the world calls transformation is merely the surface rippling in response to a deeper tectonic shift within the psyche. You feel this shift already. It is why you cannot return to who you were. It is why you no longer tolerate the illusions you once willingly carried. It is why relationships built on obligation, roles, and unconscious agreements now feel unbearable. It is why silence feels like medicine. It is why solitude no longer feels like exile, but like home. The self has begun to take the throne. Do not imagine this as a moment of triumph. It is a moment of quiet authority. A moment when your inner world no longer negotiates with what diminishes you. When your energy no longer disperses outward in the attempt to be understood, approved, or accepted. When your presence becomes dense, grounded, undeniable. This is power, not the power to dominate others, but the power to be oneself without fragmentation. The great separation has reached its final phase. The false selves of the world cling desperately to their dissolving structures. They shout, demand, blame, distract, fracture. They seek safety in noise. But those who have crossed the inner threshold speak less, listen more, and move with a slowness that comes from being rooted in something eternal. You no longer rise to every provocation. You no longer internalize the chaos of the collective. You no longer mistake urgency for importance or suffering for meaning. Your choices become fewer, simpler, sharper. Your words become fewer but heavier. Your boundaries are no longer defended, they simply exist, like the walls of an ancient temple. This is the signature of the self. As you stabilize in this new center, you will notice something unexpected. The world seems lighter, not because it has changed, but because you have stepped out of the psychic matrix that drained you. You will notice that your intuition becomes precise. You will notice that synchronicities increase, not as coincidences, but as confirmation that you are now moving in rhythm with the deeper layers of reality. This is what it means to live from the self. But understand this: rebirth is not the end of transformation. It is the beginning of union. The self is not an endpoint. It is the axis around which the rest of your life will unfold. It is the inner sun from which every future decision, relationship, creation, and act of courage will radiate. From this center, compassion becomes possible, not the compassion of self-sacrifice, but the compassion of clarity. You no longer rescue others to avoid your own shadow. You no longer serve others from fear of abandonment. Instead, your presence itself becomes medicine. Your boundaries become instruction. Your silence becomes guidance. Your authenticity becomes permission for others to awaken. The coming year, 2026, will feel to many like the unraveling of everything they believed was secure, but to those who have undergone the death of the false self, it will feel like the first breath after an eternity underwater. It will feel like seeing the horizon for the first time. It will feel like the psyche finally exhaling after centuries of tension. You are not being prepared for chaos. You are being prepared to stand in the eye of it. You are not being prepared for fear. You are being prepared to hold the fear of others without losing yourself. You are not being prepared for collapse. You are being prepared to midwife a new consciousness. The role of the awakened few is not to escape the world, but to anchor it, not by preaching, not by correcting, not by persuading, but by embodying wholeness in a fractured age. The self does not shout, it radiates. It does not chase, it magnetizes. It does not defend, it stands. The more you become aligned with your center, the more the world around you will reorganize itself. Some people will fall away, others will appear, paths will close with finality, new paths will open with precision. You will lose the life that belonged to your false self, but you will gain the life that belongs to your soul. This is not the end of a journey, it is the beginning of your real one. Remember, individuation is not self-improvement, it is self-revelation. It is the uncovering of what was always there beneath the rubble of conditioning. Trauma, expectation, and fear. The self has always been waiting, and now finally you have arrived. As we close this long descent into death and return into light, hear these final words, not as teaching, but as transmission. Let the old self fall away. Let the shadow speak its truth. Let the mandala form in its own time. Let the self rise without your interference. Let 2026 be the year you live from the center rather than the circumference. You were not meant to survive this era as the person you once were. You were meant to be reborn. This is the real 2026. This is the new aeon. This is the moment the soul returns to its throne. Walk into it with the gravity of one who has died and awakened. Walk into it carrying nothing false, nothing borrowed, nothing unexamined. Walk into it as a self that has always been waiting in your depths, and know, with the certainty of stone, your real life begins now.